My name is Bethany Wiseman. I'm a learning strategist with the Center for Accessible Learning at Algonquin College. Today, I'd like to present to you a workshop called Habit Hacks for College and Beyond. This is a pretty new workshop for me, actually. I read a few books on productivity last year and saw a few common themes that I wanted to pull together for college students. It's a little bit of an answer to the questions that I always get from students about motivation. I have a lot of students who come to talk to me about not feeling motivated to do work. They want to know how they can build motivation in their life so they feel like doing the work that they need to do, maybe in preparation for a test or to get started earlier on projects to avoid procrastination. And for a long time, I did talk about motivation with students, and then I found that it wasn't necessarily working. It wasn't necessarily having the effect that students were hoping that it would. And in my reading on productivity, a lot of the common messages around that really revolve around getting started, starting work and understanding that actually motivation comes from action. And so I started to think a little bit more about habit formation and how I could work with students on maybe changing some habits that get in the way of them being successful students, and also forming some new habits that might help them be more successful as well. So that's where this workshop is coming from. Um, our plan for today will be to talk a little bit about why habits matter. We'll talk about what habits are and focus on the 4 laws of behavior changes. So that would be for both building positive habits and eliminating negative ones. We'll talk about why tiny is mighty and why it's important just to start small when you're trying to form a new habit. We'll talk about the ABC recipe card, which is a really straightforward way of trying to form a new habit. And maybe you can challenge yourself to commit to a new habit for the upcoming semester as well. A lot of what I'm talking about today, I want to acknowledge where it's coming from. The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. Tiny Habits, The Small Changes That Change Everything by BJ Fogg, and Atomic Habits by James Clear. And I'll try to reference where a lot of the ideas are coming from as I go through, just in case it's of interest to you and you want to read a little bit more. So let's just start with the idea of student success. As a student, you have a million decisions to make. Every day, you have to make so many decisions around how you use your time and how you spend your energy, because those things are finite. You only have so much time and energy every day and every semester to use, and everybody gets the same amount of time. Sometimes it can feel like some people use their time so well and they get so much accomplished during that period of time, where someone else might feel completely the opposite, that they're not getting a lot done during that time. So here are some decisions that you might need to make, just a sampling of them. Do you get up at 7 a.m. as you planned to, or do you hit snooze for an hour? Do you use your time between classes to work on an upcoming assignment? Or do you decide instead to spend some time with some friends and catch up with them? Do you go to the gym? Or do you head home to study for your upcoming midterm? Are you going to keep working at 9 p.m.? Or are you going to decide to take an hour for yourself to do something just for you before you go to bed? And it's funny, I think when I present the options in that way, it can seem like I'm trying to say, oh, there's a good decision, and there's a bad decision, but most decisions are not good or bad, right? If you had a really poor night's sleep, maybe it's not realistic to get up at 7 o'clock as you planned. You need to hit snooze for another hour. Um, Going to work on an assignment or spending time with friends, well, both of those things are important, right? Connections, social connections are really important. It's a matter of what do you have time for in that moment. right? What is more important in that moment? Sometimes it will be the assignment, and sometimes it is the personal connection. Same with going to the gym, right? It's important to stay healthy, to exercise, to take care of your body. It is also important to study for your midterm and make sure you're prepared. So how do you find a way to maybe fit both of those things in? And same with continuing to work at night or taking time for yourself, right? The ideal is that you're getting a balance of all of those things that are important for you. And you're looking at yourself as a whole person, right? Who needs to stay healthy and needs to have social connections and needs to have exercise, but also needs to accomplish all of the things that you need to accomplish in order to be a successful student. And the thing that you also want to remember, in addition to looking for balance in your semester, you want to remember that habits, or sorry, decisions have a cumulative effect over the semester, right? So if you are always choosing to do things instead of doing schoolwork, then that's going to impact your success as a student, right? So you want to look at those patterns of habits and behaviors over the course of a semester. So let's just start with a definition. What is a habit? A habit is a routine or behavior that's performed regularly, and in most cases, it is automatic. Okay, that's from James Clear, Atomic Habit. So there are a lot of things that you do, like for instance, you wake up in the morning and you have a cup of coffee, or you wake up and you exercise, or you are in line at the grocery store and you pull out your phone and you start scrolling. Or a really common habit for most people is you brush your teeth before you go to bed at the end of the day. More than 40% of the things that you do every day are not actual decisions, they're just habit. And that to me, that's a shocking number. Means you're on autopilot for 40% of the decisions that you have to make. But that's not actually a negative thing. Habits exist because we would not be able to make decisions about every little thing that face us in a day, right? Habits actually are a way for us to save time and energy and effort because we just automatically do that thing, right? We don't have to think about what is it that I need to do in this moment. Our brain would be so overtaxed if that were the case. The thing to remember though is when something becomes really ingrained and you just do it without thinking, that can work for you, right? By saving time and effort and energy, or it can work against you if it's something that maybe isn't healthy for you or isn't helping you meet your goals. So just as a student, I know this isn't live, it's asynchronous, but maybe pause for a moment and just think, what is one daily habit or routine that helps you stay focused and helps you stay motivated as a student? What is that one habit for you? And once you've unpaused, I want you then to think, maybe pause again. What's one daily habit or routine that interferes with your ability to be a successful student? Okay. So maybe the thing that supports you is staying on campus after your last class for an hour every day. That's a good habit. Maybe that helps you concentrate and get a little bit of work done before you go home at the end of the day. Just an example. Maybe it's something completely different. And maybe one habit that interferes is you like playing video games, and it's hard to pull yourself away from playing video games. Okay, and that creeps in on the time that you might otherwise spend on school. So the idea of a habit loop, this is really the mechanics of a habit. And this is explained really, really well in the book The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And the idea behind habits is that we all have cravings. We all have things that we want. And that craving is going to drive a habit loop. And the parts of the habit loop that you should know about, first of all, there's a cue So something in the environment that tells you what routine or habit you're gonna engage in. And then there's the habit or the routine itself, and that follows the cue. So the cue triggers the habit, and then there's a reward. There's something that you get, that you benefit from when that routine has been engaged in. And the reward kind of fuels the cue again, right? Like, and it's all powered by that craving. All right, let me give you an example. For instance, maybe you have a craving for a distraction, right? Your mind just wants to be stimulated. You're a little bit bored by what you're doing. Maybe you're working on a project, okay? And you're kind of looking for that thing to stimulate you, to pull you away from working on that project. So what happens, perhaps there's a cue, your phone buzzes. You get a notification on your phone. And your routine there is to check your email, right? Or check the app that sent you the notification or the message that came in from a friend, whatever the notification was. The reward is that you have maybe made a social connection, right? And you have been distracted, right? You've been pulled away from that thing that it is that you want, that you maybe didn't want to do so much. And because that felt good, it gave you a little burst of dopamine. Next time that cue happens again, that habit is going to be like further ingrained, right? You're just going to be trained, and a lot of the times it's just muscle memory, right? Like you hear that bzz of your phone, and you don't even think about it. You just scoop up your phone and you check the notification that's just come in. So a couple of things to remember here. Our brain can't tell the difference between good habits and bad habits. It's all the same, right? You know that this is maybe a bad habit, right? If you're constantly being distracted and pulled away from your work, the same thing could be like related to working out, right? That your snooze button, your alarm goes off in the morning, and you work out in the morning, and your routine is then to get up and get dressed, and work out, and the reward is that you feel great for the rest of the day, and that continues the habit, right? Our brain can't tell, oh, one is good, one is bad. It's the same loop that's being driven in both cases. And unless you find a new routine to replace the old one, that pattern's going to continue. Remember, there's that automatic nature of habits, and that the fact that they're performed regularly. So when you have a habit, you really do need to usually replace it with something else. All right, so I'm going to focus the next little chunk of the workshop on the 4 laws of behavior change. And this is coming out of the work done by James Clear in his book, Atomic Habits. So when you're trying to form a new habit, it can help to tap into these 4 laws. The laws are, first of all, to make something obvious, to make that thing, that new habit, attractive, to make the new habit as easy as possible, and to make it satisfying as well. Okay, and we're going to look at each one of these things individually. Now, the thing with the habit is you might not be able to tap into all of these, right? There might be 1 or 2 of them that work better than the others. The more that you can incorporate, though, the easier it is to create a new habit. Or the reverse of all of these things, which we'll get to maybe after we've introduced them, is to break a habit. You're going to use the reverse of these things to get rid of that old habit, maybe that you're hoping to replace. All right. So the first law of behavior change is to make something obvious, make the new habit obvious. And one of the best ways of doing that is to try to think about the new habit in terms of time and location, right? So when you're going to do it and where you're going to do it. So you will do this new behavior, whatever it is, at a certain time in a certain location. Okay, you're trying to make that habit as obvious as possible. So for instance, if the goal is maybe to start a task list and use a task list every day, maybe the habit, making it obvious, will be I'll look over my tasks for the day at breakfast, a particular time. That's something you do every day in the kitchen because that's where you have breakfast, right? Or maybe as a student, it's going to be to check your bright space more regularly. So what you're going to do is say, I will check my bright space and my emails before my first class at my desk. Okay, whenever that first class is of the day, before that, you're going to sit down and you're going to engage in this habit. Habit stacking is also really useful and can be a way to make a habit more obvious. It's when you take a habit that you currently already have, and you try to combine it with a new habit. Okay, so for instance, if you're a coffee drinker in the morning, maybe when you drink your morning coffee, you're also going to look over your tasks for the day. That's the new habit that you're trying to pair with the old habit. You do need to make sure that the habit you're stacking with is something that you do regularly. You're not going to skip it. The second law is to make the habit attractive. So in our brains, habits are dopamine driven, a dopamine driven feedback loop. And what that means is when we engage in it, the habit, and our craving is satisfied, we get that reward at the end, our brain is flooded with dopamine. And that makes us want to actually do the thing more, right? We're motivated to do it because of that burst of dopamine in our brain. So, what can we do to make a habit attractive? Because the more attractive the habit is, the more dopamine is going to be flooded in our brain. Well, we can do something called temptation bundling, for instance. And what this is, you try to pair a habit that you want to engage in with an action that you already do regularly and that you enjoy. Okay, so for instance, maybe you really enjoy getting some exercise, going for a walk, and you also need to study for your exam. So what you do is you pair re-listening to a lecture, maybe with going for that walk or getting some exercise, right? Maybe it's a treat for you to go to your favorite coffee shop and order a special drink that you enjoy for yourself. And that's what you can do. You can bundle studying for your midterm, something that you have to do, that new habit, with something that you actually want to do. It can also help to join a culture where your desired behavior is the norm. Okay, so what I mean by that is maybe you want to exercise more often. And so you try to hang out with people who do that, right? Who will go from class to the gym at the end of the day. And just recognize also that we find behaviors attractive when we're going to get approval, when people are going to respect us, when they're going to praise us for doing those things too. So sometimes it can help to sort of let people know you're going to engage in this new behavior and sort of look for that approval from them. I mean, we don't always want to be seeking approval from outside of ourselves, but it can help to at least get that habit started. We also want to make something easy as possible when it's new. So in forming a new habit, just make it automatic through repetition and practice. The law of least effort is that we're going to usually choose the option that is the least amount of work. So what you want to do is create an environment where doing the right thing is as easy as possible. So I'll give you a couple of examples of that. For instance, if your goal is to eat better, more healthily, then maybe what you want to do is every weekend cut up vegetables for the week and leave them in the fridge with a healthy dip so that when you're hungry, that snack is already made. You can just reach in and have a healthy snack instead of, like, oh, I don't want to really cut the vegetables. Maybe I'll have chips instead, or I'll have a muffin instead. So making it as easy as possible. I used to do this for working out as well, the night before because I had to go pretty early in the morning before work. So what I would do the night before is I would have my gym bag by the door. I would lay out all of my gym clothes. I would put a granola bar in my bag. I would have my water bottle filled and by the door. I would know where my keys were. And then when the snooze button went off, I knew that everything was pretty much set up for me. I just really had to roll out of bed, get dressed in the clothes that were already laid out, and then drive to the gym. So as easy as possible, makes it just simple to sort of make that better decision. The opposite, I will talk about this a little bit later. The opposite is true when you want to try to make sure that you're not engaging in a habit. You want to make it a little bit more difficult. So for instance, I keep my treats in the basement, right? So if I want a snack in the middle of my day, if I'm working from home, I have to walk from the second story of my house all the way to my basement. And sometimes that's enough to sort of deter me from sort of engaging in that unhealthier habit. The 2-minute rule is a great thing to think about when you're starting a new habit. Try to keep things under 2 minutes. Don't go too big with a habit. And that's the theme of like the sort of the second half of this workshop. You want to make sure that habits take under 2 minutes, if at all possible. The idea behind that is if a habit is too big and overwhelming, you just won't engage in it. You won't start it, you won't be successful with it. And I love this quote from James Clear in Habits. Standardize before you optimize. Optimize means improve it, right? But I mean, if you haven't standardized something, if it's the habit isn't there at all, even in like the smallest, tiniest form, it's really hard to work with that, right? So you can't improve unless that habit exists to begin with. So start somewhere and make it easy. And then finally, what you want to do is make the habit satisfying. If you reward yourself, you will repeat that behavior. You need to feel immediately successful, even if it's something small. And we're going to talk about that more when we get into some of the things brought up in tiny habits. So we'll do that shortly. But in general, how could you make a habit feel more satisfying? Well, some people will use something like a habit tracker. They'll just sort of come up. There's a chart here on the PowerPoint, and you can see that the person is tracking certain habits over time. Every day that they do something, they're going to give themselves an X so they can see over time that they're engaging in that habit. And that can, like it's almost like a gold star, right? Like, oh, look, I did this thing, and it seems like such a small thing, and something that motivates kids, but it's very motivating to a lot of adults as well. Don't break the chain. I really like this strategy. The idea behind this is when you set a goal for yourself, I am going to do this thing every day. Maybe math is really hard for you. So every day you're going to study for 20 minutes for math. And you do it on day 1 and day 2 and day 3 and day 4 and day 5 and day 6. So you have a chain of 6 days in a row that you've studied for math. But then you have a biology test on the 7th day and you don't study for math. You're too busy. But that's okay. You have a chain of 6. And what you're going to do is the day after the biology test, you are going to step right back into it. And you're going to study on day 1 and day 2 and day 3 and day 4 and day 5 and day 6 and day 7 and day 8. And then lo and behold, something comes up and you don't make it to 9. But that's okay. Your new chain is 8 instead of 6. And you're going to start a new chain. It's all about just getting right back into it. And never miss twice it's a similar idea. I do this with my daughter. My daughter is 5.5 and she's just starting to learn how to read. And some days she's tired and she'll sort of grouch a little bit about like, do I have to read today? Sometimes we don't really have a lot of time if we've had a family commitment or something that's a little out of the ordinary. So what we do is we never miss twice. If we have a day where she doesn't read out loud to us, then 100% she's going to read the next day. 100% because we never miss 2 days in a row. So that can be a really good way of just getting right back on track with a habit. There are lots of habit tracking apps out there. I've just listed a few. I'm not going to list them all out loud, but many of them you can see. I think this is Habit Hub down in the bottom. They're very simple, where you set a goal and then you click that you've done it. And then you can sort of see over time how you've done something. I will mention Habitica. I feel like it's been around for a while, and I've had some students who really, really enjoy it. You get to create an avatar for yourself and set goals and have task lists that you get to check off. And it's fun because it's kind of gamified. You can level up and earn points, and you can invite friends. So there's an accountability piece there that a lot of people like as well. So you might want to check that out if you're looking for a new habit tracking app. So let's do an example of a new academic habit. I know, you know what, whenever I give this presentation, I'm like, oh, I talk a lot about health and eating well and exercising. So what we'll do is we'll talk about an academic habit here. Maybe your new habit is, I need to work on something for school for about 2 hours every night. Maybe you're not even saying a specific habit. You've just maybe realized after your first term, I'm not doing as well as I would like. I think I need to be putting in more time for school. So every day I'm going to try to do 2 hours in the evening. So the laws here, first of all, you want to make it obvious. So remember, that's about time and location. After I finish my dinner, there's the time. I'm going to go to my work area, turn on my computer, and get started on that next task on my list. Okay, so you're giving a time, dinner, after dinner, and a location. You're going to go to your work area. You're going to try to make it attractive. So maybe for that, you're going to remind yourself that your friends and family care about your commitment to school. You're going to make it easy. Just keep your work area set up and tidy. So every time when you finish the 2 hours, you're going to put things back in their place so that it's just really easy to sit down and pick up where you left off. And you're going to make it satisfying. So maybe for you, that means you're going to set your timer for 2 hours. And when the time is up, you're going to give yourself a colorful check mark on your agenda or your habit tracker for that day. Yep, I did that. I'm acknowledging that I'm an awesome person who can get things done, and that's going to feel really good for you. So make it satisfying in that way. What about breaking bad habits? So things that you don't want to do any longer. You want to do the opposite of the 4 laws to break habits. So the original law was make it obvious. The opposite is true here. You want to make it invisible. Okay, you want to reduce your exposure to that cue, right? So again, well, I gave you an example of this earlier, right? It's like keeping my treats in the basement, right? Or if like if it's video gaming, like you sit down and you just start to play video games as a bit of a break, and then it's 3 hours later and you've lost all this time. Do you remove the batteries from your controller and put them somewhere out of reach? Or I often suggest to students that they create 2 profiles in their Windows account so that their fun stuff is in one profile, and then just doing school in the other profile. And then you actually have to switch profiles if you want to check your social media or your email or anything like that. So that can be really useful for students as well. If something's attractive, well, you want to make it unattractive. So consider the benefits of avoiding that habit and consider those negatives that come along with it. The opposite of making it easy, making it difficult. So putting up a barrier in place instead. You want to make it instead of satisfying, unsatisfying. So create that situation where engaging in the habit is distasteful, right? So that might involve having an accountability partner who's going to call you out on something if you engage in this behavior instead, or maybe some sort of contract. So we'll move on to talking a little bit about some of the ideas in Tiny Habits. This book really focuses on behavior design, right? They talk about how to form new habits through a very particular order of steps. We're not going to talk about all of the steps. There are 7 in total. But what I want to do is focus on step 4, step 5, step 6. So starting tiny, finding a good prompt, and celebrating your success, just in a little bit more detail. So, tiny is mighty when it comes to behavior change. That's the whole idea behind this book, Tiny Habits, is about starting really, really small, like almost in a way that's it's ridiculous. Like, and it's interesting to me because the author of this book, some of the examples that he uses, for instance, like flossing his teeth. His habit, his tiny habit initially was to floss a single tooth. Which almost seems so pointless, like, why just floss a single tooth? But it's that whole idea that James Clear was talking about earlier, which is the standardize before you optimize, right? Like, if you're not flossing at all, you can't improve upon it, right? But flossing one single tooth every day is better than nothing, and it's giving you a starting place to transform that habit. Um, and in addition to that, he talks about wanting to do more push-ups. So one of the habits he engaged in was every time he went to the washroom, after he flushed and washed his hands, he would do 2 push-ups. And how that habit sort of flourished over time, just starting really, really small. So um, the idea behind it is that people want to make change, but it's really hard. There's that disconnect, right? I want this thing, but then you don't actually follow through with it. I want to be on the honor roll, but I get sucked into playing video games or hanging out with friends, and I don't do the work I need to do in order to get on the honor roll. When we fail, we actually feel really discouraged. We blame ourselves. But the idea behind this is, I think it's really interesting. What BJ Fogg says is that failure to change, it's not a personal flaw. It really is the way that we're wired. What we need to do is sort of look for the design flaw there. Like what is sort of wrong with how we've designed our habits, and how can we form the new habits to sort of correct that design flaw. So why is it best to start small? I kind of covered this already, but it's if you're starting tiny, tiny is fast. You can start it now. You don't have to wait for this big moment. You don't have to wait to have time. It's safe. You're not taking on anything that's too big or out of the realm of possibility. But it can get big, right? Like you start by flossing one single tooth, and then suddenly you're flossing twice a day, all of your teeth. Um, and it doesn't rely on motivation and willpower. And this is what I was talking at the very, very beginning of this presentation. Motivation and willpower are very unreliable. And, students can talk about these things and want to have them, but really small habits don't require a lot of motivation or willpower because they're tiny and they can be transformative. They really can change your life. And a lot of tiny habits, the book, we'll talk about people whose lives were like completely transformed by just changing one small thing and then allowing that thing to grow and impact other parts of their life. A note on motivation and ability. A few notes, actually. The more motivated you are to do a behavior, the more likely you are to do it. That's why people want to be motivated, right? Like they're, Bethany, how do I get motivation? I don't feel like doing these things related to school. Well, yeah, sure. If you feel more motivated, you are going to work on school. It's just it's hard to um, create that motivation if you don't feel it already, right? The harder something is to do, the less likely you are to do it. And that has a lot to do with ability, right? Like I feel like I can't do this thing. It's too hard for me, so I'm not going to follow through with it. So really, motivation and ability work together. They're like teammates, right? If your ability is high, your motivation can be a bit lower, and that's okay because your ability is going to pull you up. And then vice versa, right? When your motivation is high, your ability might be a little lower, but the motivation is going to help carry you through. So motivation's unreliable. It's very complex. So you can have really competing or conflicting motivations. like wanting to do well in school and wanting to have a really great social life, right? Those things can compete with one another or conflict, right? They don't necessarily go hand in hand. Motivation, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, it comes in waves, right? Like, oh, I'm super highly motivated, so I'm going to do this thing. And then, like, the motivation can tank. That's where sometimes people, they'll go out and they'll get the really expensive gym membership, right? And use it for a couple of weeks and then never go back. So, the motivation, the large scale motivation can be useful for one time actions, but don't necessarily carry you through longer than that. So it can be great when you get it, like, just when you need to get a lot of work done for school, right? That large wave of motivation carries you through maybe your final exam period. But then it doesn't continue beyond that because again, it's unreliable. Motivation can also fluctuate on a small scale, right? You can be motivated, highly motivated, and then 10 minutes later have lost your motivation. Maybe something comes in, it distracts you, something happens, you get a phone call, and then your motivation just tanks. And also, motivation is a little bit it's abstract, right? Like motivation to finish your program so that you can work with children or work in the healthcare field. Sometimes it's too far away. There's nothing tangible about that thing, right? That's in the now, that's going to reward you now. And that can be a little bit challenging to rely on because, yeah, I want to do this thing, but it's 2 years away, and that's not helping me write this paper right now. Also, motivation doesn't result in long term change, right? It doesn't actually let you think about how able you are to do something or the prompt. The prompt is that cue I was talking about. Your ability and prompt are often more reliable than motivation is. So, in that respect, you can actually use ability and prompts to create habits because that decreases the importance of motivation. Motivation isn't as important anymore, so you don't need to rely on it. When it's there, that's awesome. That's going to carry you further. But when it's not there, your ability and your prompt can carry you through. All right. So when you're creating an anchor or a cue for yourself, you have to find something that's going to work. Because even if you have motivation and you have ability, nothing happens without a prompt. Okay. There has to be something in your environment that is going to cue you to do the work. So, where does this new habit fit into your day? You want to look for that anchor moment. You need a prompt that's going to happen reliably at the same time. One thing to think about when it comes to this is people tend to have the most routines in the morning. And as you get further into the day, that's where the routines break down or where you have changes to your day. There are other things that happen, or, the end of your day doesn't look the same from day to day like the beginning of the day does, right? Just think about that for a moment, right? Like your evenings, depending on the day, might look very different, but your mornings probably almost always look the same. Okay. Maybe, there's a difference between weekdays and weekends for you, but for the most part, you have more routines in the morning. So here are some suggested anchors for your morning. You can think about when my feet hit the ground first thing in the morning, I will do this thing. After I flush the toilet, after I brush my teeth, after I make my bed, after I pour my coffee, after I feed the dog, if you have a dog, right? Most of these things, most people are going to do, right? I do most of these things. I'm not a coffee drinker. I would have to be my orange juice or after I eat my cereal. But, and I don't have a dog. But all these other things most people do. Now, how about the midday routine for you? Do you get phone calls? So after I hear my phone ring, I will Or maybe it's for you, it's text messages or emails coming in. After I drink my cup of coffee in the middle of the day, after I use the bathroom during the day, after I have lunch. It's all about the frequency and when these things happen. And do they match with that other thing that you need to do? Evening routines, when I walk in the door after work, when I put down my bag, after I sit down to eat, after I clean the dishes, after I turn on the TV. So think about those things that you might do regularly in the evening. Try to think as much as possible about where the new habit fits naturally into your day. So when you can match the physical location, okay, find an anchor that you already do. So if it's, I'm getting away from academics, but if it's flossing your teeth as the new habit, probably you're going to do that in the bathroom, right? You're not going to do it at your desk. You're not going to do it in the kitchen. But if it's something that's work related, you're probably going to do it at your desk instead. You can also match the frequency. So find an anchor that matches how often you need that new habit to occur. So if the new habit is only once a day, you pair it with an anchor that happens once a day, right? If you want to do that habit throughout the day, then you have to think of something like going to the bathroom or drinking water that you do throughout the day that you can pair with the new habit. And this last one is less important, but you can also match the theme or the purpose. So if you associate caffeine with being productive, then you could pair a new productivity habit with drinking your coffee, right? So maybe it's like creating a task list. Okay, so I drink my coffee and I create my task list. But for you, if drinking coffee is relaxing, maybe it's going to be a new relaxation habit, like writing in my journal. I'm going to drink my coffee and write in my journal instead. Finally, it is really important to celebrate. When you celebrate, that's going to actually encode new habits, because it's gonna give you that rush of dopamine. And this seems really cheesy. I think a lot of people are kind of like, "Oh, I feel uncomfortable even thinking about, like, celebrating my new habits." It's a brain hack. It's gonna start to hopefully drive the craving for that new habit loop that you've created. You need to celebrate immediately, so it can't be something that, "Oh, I'll do later on my own." It needs to feel good and authentic for you. So, you gotta find something that you're comfortable with. I'll give you some suggestions on the next slide. And sometimes that's gonna depend on your personality, your culture, and all of that. Your celebration has to happen immediately afterwards, whether it's internal, all right, just saying to yourself in your head, "Good job," right? Or external, doing a little happy dance. Um, You have to feel good and you have to create that feeling of success in order to fuel that loop. So here are some examples. All right, saying like, yes, imagining your child clapping for you, right? Just giving yourself a little nod, giving yourself a big smile, saying something like good job or you've got this. Just find something that suits you. If it feels unnatural, do it anyway. Dopamine, as I said, is a key part to making those habits stick for yourself. And it does take practice to do something like celebrating. Also, remember you're doing something worth celebrating, right? Acknowledge yourself and the good work you're doing. So, I don't know if you've noticed this, but we've created a bit of an acronym here. This is from Tiny Habits. You can use an ABC recipe card to map out your habit. The A being anchor, the B being behavior, and the C being celebration. All right. So the anchor moment is that thing that's going to cue you to do the behavior. And then after you've done the behavior, you're going to do your little celebration, your jazz hand celebration. So here are some examples. After I brush my teeth, that's the anchor, I will Floss one tooth. I told you he was big on flossing one tooth. That's your behavior. And then you are going to celebrate. You're going to give yourself a little V for victory and move on. Okay. Here's another ABC. After I sit down at work, that's my anchor. I will turn off notifications for social media. That's going to be my behavior. And my celebration is I'm just going to smile for myself. So I'd like to challenge you. We're getting to the end here, so you can pause this, or you can watch to the end and then give this activity a try. Come up with your own ABC recipe card. What habit is it that you want to engage in? And then create that anchor behavior celebration for yourself. So maybe for you, it's checking your Algonquin College email every day because you've missed out on some important emails that have had consequences. Maybe it's keeping up with your readings by doing a little bit every day, or it's creating a daily task list. You know, you don't have to choose one of these things. Choose something that's, important to you and your success as a student, or you can choose one of these just to get some practice with it. I think it's worth noting that there are certain habits that are more likely to make you a successful college student. And they kind of come in certain themes. So one of those important themes is having good time management habits. So those would be having routines, making plans, and working on school most days. Another habit theme would be initiation and taking action habits. So that's getting started, using resources, reaching out, asking for help on your campus. And then finally, wellness habits. And these habits involve things like eating, sleeping, exercise, building good connections. And again, I sort of started by talking about some of these things, looking at yourself as a whole person, taking a holistic approach to learning, because all of these wellness habits have a very huge impact on your ability to learn well and your ability to build your endurance and your stamina over the course of the semester. So we'll leave it there for today. I have the quote here. This is the real power of habit, the insight that your habits are what you choose them to be. You have a lot more control over your habits than you think. So I really challenge you to consider, the good habits that you have and try to build on those and celebrate them. And then maybe look at your habits that are holding you back a little bit as a student and think about whether you might be able to change them or replace them in some way. As always, I welcome people to reach out by email. Feel free to contact me. Let me know that you watched this video and ask any questions that you might have. Best of luck with your semester. Take care.